Hello and welcome to day 9 of the live virtual book tour for The Reckoning. My name is Kayla Knu. I'm an author, YouTuber, gamer, and aerialist. And today, what are we doing? Today we are going to be reading chapter 6 of The Reckoning. If you guys missed the previous tour events and need to hear all of the other chapters first, they are all linked below in the playlist. So they're in the playlist and you should check them out. The Reckoning has officially been released, guys. This is release week. It came out yesterday. It is live. It is available in hardback, paperback, and ebook editions. And all of those links are below, so you can check it out. You can order your own copy. If you have one already, you can read along with me as I read through this chapter. So The Reckoning is an adult dark fantasy novel, if you guys don't already know this. And I am super excited, guys. Let me grab the book. Boom, here it is. In the chat. Okay, so I need to drop some content warnings, which include violence, both physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, blood and gore, rape, explicit descriptions of that, victim blaming, trauma, what else? Loss of a loved one, murder, death. And those are now in the chat. I will pin it so that if anybody stops in later, they can see those content warnings. I want to say that there's also a reference to suicide in there somewhere. But it's very I don't know. It's like a reference in the sense of someone died years ago. But yeah, so we are here. I have my book. I know I started a couple minutes late, but here it is. And chapter 6, that's what we're here for. I'm just going to get right into chapter 6. My beautiful bookmark. Thinking I might have to give these out at some point for something because they're gorgeous. And sneak peek at the inside of the book. So chapter 6 is back to Kai's perspective. He is the main character. So yes. And if you guys have any questions that you want me to answer for when I'm done reading or whatever, drop them in the chat and I will get to them. But here it goes. Let me get situated. Chapter 6, Kai. I woke in a sea of black feathers. The familiar ache in my back haunted me as I realized my wings had unfurled in my sleep. I barely noticed the dull throbbing of my wrist in comparison. A solid metal band dangled from my arm like a shackle on a prisoner. It was the calling. Even though I'd been prepared for the calling, it came at a less than ideal time. I had only a few minutes to report to the throne room, and I needed to conceal my wings before I left my room. A dread filled me as I reached back to touch the skin on my back where my wings jetted out. I winced from the tenderness of the area, but I had no time to wait. The pain was unavoidable. I took a deep breath and drew on the dark magic within me. I forced my freed wings to retract into my back in one swift motion. My stomach flipped from the shearing pain, and I nearly vomited. As I staggered to my feet, a trickle of blood ran down my back. In my mirror, I could see the 2 long slits that remained as a bloody reminder. It was unnatural for me to fight against my body's development, and the pain was my consequence. My back ached as I headed toward the throne room. I tried to keep up my usual appearance as I walked the halls, but my body had other plans. A fit of dizziness consumed me, and I nearly crushed a handmaiden as I stumbled. "Your Highness," she squeaked as I fell into her. Her arms pushed against me as she tried to hold me up, but her attempt was futile. She collapsed under my weight, and we both fell to the floor. Dazed, I tried to focus, but the maiden's words were lost in the spinning of the world. She pushed against me, panicked. My senses came into focus as I noticed her rapid heartbeat. I was drawn to it, just as a spider is drawn to a fly caught in its web. The blood in her veins called to me, but I resisted. "Tell no one of this," I said sternly as I found my way to my feet. Her watery eyes locked with mine for a brief moment before turning to the floor. "Of course, Your Royal Highness," she replied with a bow. Her unnatural movement caught my attention. She was injured, but to what extent I did not know. "Take the rest of the day off. If anyone asks, tell them the prince told you to stay out of his sight. Expect to find extra compensation at the end of the week." I turned away from the girl before she could look up at me. "Thank you, Your Royal Highness," she said. I continued my journey to the throne room without further incident. Hunger became pain's companion as I walked. My mood was deteriorating and my patience was thin. I needed to hunt sooner rather than later. As I approached the throne room, I was greeted by 2 guardsmen standing at the entrance. They nodded respectfully as they opened the large black doors. I walked in, glad to find the curtains drawn and the candelabras lit. The dim lighting was easy on my eyes. A long, silver carpet stretched across the room, from the door's entrance to the raised platform where my parents sat atop their thrones. The king's throne was taller than the queen's, with a spiked back that stretched toward the ceiling. They were made of silver with jewels embedded in the trim and soft black cushions lining the seats. I made my way down the long aisle lined with empty pews and noticed Harrison and Daniel standing at the foot of the thrones with metal bands on their wrists. No one bothered to look at me. Their attention was focused on a swarm of viewing orbs that hovered before them. Curious as to what they were watching, I nearly missed the guards and warlocks that lined the perimeter of the room. They wore their black and silver uniforms and stood stiffly in place. I wondered if a single one of them could best me in a fight. "Malachi, you're just in time for the show," my father said with a laugh. He leaned back in his throne, but his eyes remained on the orbs. They streamed live footage of competitors being called. My heart raced. Had an orb been there, watching me when I was called? Had my father seen my wings? The thought plagued me as I scanned the footage on the orbs. I saw competitors from all over Altera being called. Some were in their homes, others were out in the streets. Ones that resisted cried out in pain from the shocks of the bracelet. It would kill them if they didn't comply. There was a girl deep in the woods. She was so far away from a viewing station that she was sprinting to get to one. The forest branches scratched at her, but she pushed through with determination. Her fight for survival had already begun. I looked over every orb, but not one of them showed the throne room. There were no orbs following me, Harrison, or Daniel. I took a deep breath, relieved. No one had seen my bloody wings after all. "Father, what is the meaning of this?" Jess shouted as she stormed into the room. Everyone turned to look at her as she approached. Her flat black hair hung limp around her small face, which only accented the horns that corkscrewed straight out of the top of her head. It annoyed me that her horns looked like an exact replica of mine. Hers were shorter and thinner, but it made us look too similar. "It's the calling, child. You know what that means," my father replied. "Or have you grown ignorant with age?" His smirk was cruel, and out of the corner of my eye, I could see Jess cringe. She was bratty and mean, but our father was always too harsh with his words. "But the reckoning wasn't supposed to happen until next year," she said. "What about the wedding? We've been planning it all summer." It was hard to believe the words that came out of her mouth. She couldn't really be upset about her arranged marriage being postponed. Since the day our father promised her hand to Harrison for his father's success on the battlefields, she had done nothing but complain. To top it all off, she treated Harrison like he was her lapdog. He deserved way better than her, but my father wanted him to be his second son. The wedding will have to wait. Nothing is more important than the reckoning, my father said, glaring at Jess from his throne. Jess's eyes began to water, but I had no pity for her. She always cried over the smallest things. Dear, my mother said, couldn't you marry them before the departure? Jess has been waiting all these years, and Harrison just turned 18 last week. She smiled at father, and his anger melted away. I wondered if my mother was secretly an empath, given the way she could alter my father's foul mood so easily. It had to be magic. Yes, but they've waited this long. I'm sure a few more months isn't too long to wait, is it, Harrison? My father asked as he looked toward Harrison. No, Your Majesty, Harrison replied with a bow of his head. I'm honored to have been called and eager to prove myself worthy of your daughter's hand. Harrison was always so compliant to my father's wishes that he made me look bad. It frustrated me that he never stood up for himself, even when he was made to do things he hated. Wonderful, my father laughed. Let's move on to more pressing matters. Competitors are being rounded up as we speak. You boys can take the night to prepare yourselves, but you must be at the processing center before midday tomorrow. I expect high performance from each of you. Show the people just how strong the Dark Nation is and make me proud. Yes, father, I replied. At the same time, Harrison and Daniel said, Yes, Your Majesty. With that, we were dismissed. Daniel stayed behind to have a private talk with my father, but Harrison and I exited through the main doors. Jess followed closely behind us, unusually quiet. Maybe she really was upset about the wedding being postponed. Harrison took Jess's hand and gave her a smile. I was sure he only did it to brighten her somber mood. He was too nice to her. She smiled in return, perking up from that small gesture. It made my stomach churn. Can I speak with you in private? Jess said. Her request was for Harrison, but he looked in my direction as if he needed permission. We can meet up later, I said as I walked away. No part of me had any desire to hear their conversation. The thought of Harrison with my sister was revolting, and my patience was at its limit. I needed to feed. And then there's a steam break. Returning from my hunt, I had no worries about the reckoning. As the prince, I had unlimited access to the recordings of past reckonings and had studied them closely over the past few years. They all had the same three-phase structure. Each phase had individual challenges that tested competitors' strength and skill, but the real test was staying alive. The reckoning took place in the in-between, an isolated patch of forest nestled within a perfect ring of mountains. Transport ships were the only way to get in or out, so wilderness survival skills were key, though combat skills were equally important. There were no rules in regard to interactions between competitors, which meant they could work together or in opposition. However, I'd only ever witnessed competitors sabotaging one another. Unnecessary bloodshed happened quite often. A part of me was excited by the idea of the unknown, of the potential bloodshed, but I kept those desires to myself. The full moon was rising in the sky as I made my way across the palace grounds. My hunt had restored my energy levels and quelled the hunger that plagued me. It was amazing, the strength I felt after feeding, but it would fade and turn back into crippling hunger soon enough. With no time to waste, I hurried into the palace. Moving swiftly down the dark halls, I snuck into the secret passage that would take me into the caverns below. The moonstone was kept hidden within the maze of tunnels and would be at its strongest once the moon reached its apex. It was pitch black in the passage, but I could see in the dark, one of the more convenient attributes of being a Deirdre. Rounding the final turn in the passage, I was greeted by the silver glow of the moonstone. It floated in the middle of the cavern with magic symbols drawn on the floor in a circle below it. The crescent moon shape that symbolized dark magic was the most prominent. Energy swirled within the stone and cast iridescent colors around the room. I was captivated by its beauty, its power. There was a gravitational pull that drew me to the stone whenever I was near it. The dark magic within me was naturally drawn to its source. In a way, the stone was a part of me, and I was a part of the stone. It was the only thing that could bind my power, and if I wanted to keep my abilities a secret throughout the reckoning, that was exactly what I had to do. The materials I needed for the ritual were already in the room. I pulled the spellbook containing the binding ritual from the shelf along the wall. The page needed, marked by a folded corner. I knew this day would come and had gone over the ritual 100 times. There would be no mistakes. Grabbing candles and a silver athame from the cabinet, I made my way over to the moonstone. I placed the candles over the symbols on the floor and sat outside the circle, with the book open in front of me. A twinge beneath my skin told me the stone knew what I was about to do and did not approve. I pushed the thought from my mind as I finished my preparations. The last piece of the ritual was my family ring. I placed it directly under the moonstone. It would act as my totem. Instead of casting the binding spell on myself, I would enchant the ring with it. That way, if things got too risky, I could take the ring off and access my full power. Sitting cross-legged, I slit the palms of my hands with the silver athame. My hands rested on my knees, palms to the ceiling, as I began to chant in Tenebrsul, the ancient Deirdre language. The moonstone responded immediately. Its energy swirled faster, and its power brightened the room. Dark magic electrified my blood as it radiated from my body. My chant continued unfazed as the power gripped at me. It wanted to pull me apart, but I was in control. I forced the energy to listen to my words, and the silver glow of the moonstone's energy swirled around the dark tendrils that escaped me. The magics intertwined and surrounded the ring. Sweat dripped from my face as I maintained my chant through to the end. The ritual was almost over. Curling my hand into a fist, I dripped blood across my ring. It absorbed into the ring along with the black and silver magical energies. The ritual was complete. I relaxed, hunching over as the energy in the room dissipated. The binding ritual took more out of me than expected. I hesitated briefly before grabbing the ring. In my exhausted state, I wasn't sure how the binding magic would affect me. It didn't matter, though. I knew the risk before I began the spell, and I'd decided a long time ago to take it. When I returned the ring to its proper place on my hand, relief washed over me. There was no pain. In fact, the constant pool of magic that came from keeping my wings hidden was gone. I still had the discomfort from my wings being trapped within my body, but I no longer needed to actively use magic to keep them in. I returned the book and candles to their proper places on the shelves before I left the cavern. Even though the ring only gave me a small amount of relief, it felt like a miracle. In that moment, I hoped the ring would prevent my body from transitioning before my ascension. It was a stupid hope, but I carried the thought with me as I made my way to my room, blissfully unaware of the challenges I was about to face. And that is the end of chapter 6. Oh, if you guys didn't already know, I love Kai. I love Kai chapters so much. That's why he is the MC. I mean, technically there's 3 main characters, but you have to pick one, and Kai goes through the most changes. So book 1, he is the main character, and I love him, and I cannot wait to write an entire book from his perspective. Gosh. So I may not have shared this with you guys yet, but The Reckoning, obviously it's the first book. It's book 1 of the Intertwined series. And this year I am writing 3 books, the next 3 books in the series, 1 from each character's perspective. That's the plan. That's what's happening. So each character will have their own book next and have their own journeys before coming back together for the rest of the series. So that is to come. Get excited. If you guys haven't already, you can pick up a copy of this book. It is available now, officially released yesterday. I am officially a published author, and I couldn't be more excited about it. If you guys have read The Reckoning, make sure you leave me a review, please. If you haven't, think about picking it up. If you missed the other videos, check them out. The playlist is linked below because I've read the first 6 chapters, and they're out there and free for you guys to listen to. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my newsletter, because that is how you're going to know what's happening when it's happening. You'll be the first to hear when the next books in the series are coming, what they are called, and all of that good fun stuff. You'll get the cover reveals first. So if you want to be in the know, subscribe to my newsletter. And tomorrow is the last event for my live book tour. And I will be reading chapter 7 in this bad boy. Okay, guys? Chapter 7 is Harrison's perspective. And I'm super, okay. I want to say I'm super excited to read it, but it's also probably the darkest chapter in the book as far as like psychologically, because there's sexual violence happening. Okay, so tomorrow's stream is going to be at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to read chapter 7, and it's going to be a hard read because rape is happening. And I'm just going to say that because content warnings. Rape happens, and it's male victim rape that happens in this next chapter. Which I guess is kind of a spoiler, which is why I'm like hesitant to put content warnings on things. But it is what it is. And if you guys want to see how dark it gets, I'm going to read it tomorrow, and it's probably going to be super awkward because writing it's one thing, reading it out loud to everyone is a whole different ball game. Oh, Blue, it's okay, because even though you won't be there, you can catch it on the replay. If you really want to hear me read chapter 7. It's gonna be out there, guys. I'm not gonna remove these videos. My live tour will be available on the replay forever. For now, unless YouTube decides to flag it for the sexual content. Which, can I even read this online? Does anyone know? I don't know. I'm gonna do it. We'll see what happens. Yeah, and we're like, what are we at? We're on like page 50. I've read like 50 pages in this book. For you guys, for free. So that's it. I am excited. Thank you guys for being here with me today while I read this. And I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys review it. If you guys want to chat with me about it, hit me up on Discord. Those are both linked below, because I love chatting about it. And yeah, I love to hear what people think about my characters and my worlds and my content, I guess. I don't know. Let's nerd out together. Hit me up. And I will see you guys tomorrow if you're available at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, p.m. in the afternoon. Other than that, I'll see you guys later. Bye.